tonight. It's a race against the clock for first responders.
My mom told me she heard some creaking. It woke her up. She didn't fall back asleep. Obviously she didn't think the building was going to fall, otherwise she would have left.
I'm thinking we're racing against the clock because the rest of the building is going to come down. I realized that when I opened the door, and then what I'm thinking is, if I start to feel something come down, how do I jump on my daughter to save her?
It's day 3 since a condo collapsed in Miami, Florida. More than 100 people still unaccounted for. And there are more questions than answers. But how did we get here? We'll break it down. Plus,
it's difficult to see anyone lose their freedom. But seeing somebody lose their life through torture over 9.5 minutes is incomparably worse.
former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin gets a historic 22.5 years for the murder of George Floyd. What this could mean for officers who find themselves on the wrong side of the jail in the future. BNC Live starts now.
And we're following it. Breaking news this hour. Standing by for a press conference happening right now in Surfside, Florida. Let's take a listen.
And we're coordinating their services, chief among them Jewish Community Services, which also operates the 211 helpline here with licensed clinicians, and they specialize in trauma and grief counseling. Also our Community Action and Human Services agencies and Juvenile Services Department. Those are county departments with our own licensed psychologists and social workers on the scene assisting. Florida Blue has also offered to assist, and we've set up a grief hotline. That number is 833-848-1762. Again, 833-848-1762. Among many, many others who are stepping up and helping us. I just wanted to say how very, very moved I am, and all of us are, at the incredible outpouring of support that we have received right here in Surfside from all across the globe in the midst of this incredible tragedy. We know people are feeling this, they're feeling connected to us. We feel your support, we feel your love and compassion. This has truly shown us how interconnected we are as a world, as a global community. So on behalf of Miami-Dade County, I just want to say thank you so much to the entire world for stepping up and holding us in the palm of your hands. Thank you so very much for your love and for your prayers. And financially, we have received incredible support. There are multiple sites now available, and over $750,000 has been received through just one of the funds, supportsurfside.org, that was set up by Miami Foundation, Coral Gables Foundation, and Key Biscayne. So God bless our families and our first responders. We hold you in our hearts. Your labors have been just monumental, and we know you do it with passion and commitment, and you live to find people alive in the rubble. En español puedo decir. Finalmente hoy hemos hecho progreso con el fuego y el humo, que estaba muy mal en la mañana y ahora está bajando un poquito. Y con eso pudimos seguir con nuestra búsqueda y rescate. Continuamos con los perros, con el equipo y con sonar y cámara. Y estamos enfocando en el sistema de mapeo del sitio, y la prioridad continúa en buscar personas vivas. Estamos con esperanza y estamos trabajando hora tras hora para encontrar gente allí vivos. Hoy finalmente descubrimos otro cuerpo. Y estamos todavía identificándolo, no tenemos la información, la identificación, pero vamos a usar DNA, información para identificarlos, y todas las familias han dado su DNA para que podamos usar para identificar. También de los 3 que hemos descubierto que fueron descubierto ayer, ya comunicamos con las familias, ya saben ellos, pero por consideración para su privacidad no vamos a decir en este momento quiénes son. Y con eso tenemos contables ahora 130 y no contables 156 y los muertos son 5. Estamos coordinando con el Estado, con agencias federales y todos están muy involucrados, llegaron inmediato, están ayudándonos. Y tenemos también todo tipo de servicio social, exactamente donde están las familias del condado, servicios del condado, del estado y especialmente de una agencia Jewish Community Services que especializa en trauma y pérdida. Tenemos una línea para los que quieren consejos por teléfono, 833-848-1762 y más. Hay muchas más personas ayudándonos y quiero decir finalmente que estamos tan emocionados por todo que han hecho por alrededor del mundo, significando que somos un mundo muy pequeño, somos todos conectados y todos están orando, pensando, rezando con nosotros y nosotros sentimos su amor y estamos tan agradecidos. Y con dinero, fondos, hemos recibido $70 y $50 mil ya en un fondo solamente y tenemos otros fondos. Entonces mucha gente donando. Gracias a todos y especialmente los que están trabajando tan fuerte, descubrir más personas vivas y estamos juntos con ellos. Gracias.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And now Senator Marco Rubio.
First, I want to echo everything that everyone else has said, and that's our extraordinary gratitude for the men and women who are here working from all across the state, frankly, all across the world, to try to help these victims, both here in the rescue phase and also in all of the associated needs that come with it. This is a highly complex disaster. I'm here to speak briefly about the federal response to it, which I think has been substantial and which we are grateful to the White House and all federal officials for having done it. To begin with, this building had a substantial number of foreign nationals and or families of foreign nationals. And my office, in conjunction with other congressional offices, has been responsible in helping obtain visas very quickly for a lot of people who need to travel here. My understanding is that most of them are either here now or are en route. I want to thank the State Department. They've been phenomenal in all of our consulates around the world and embassies and expediting these visas to travel here for the families. The State Department is now on site. They now have a personnel on site, which will help further expedite this should additional relatives need to come here and for any arrangements that need to be made after the fact. Also, of course, FEMA is here. Unlike other disaster situations, in this situation, all victims that have been impacted by this are going to be registered through the family center that's located here. They will then be channeled towards FEMA to determine eligibility and what services they are eligible for from the federal government. In addition, additional federal resources may be made available as requested by the county, whether it's the Army Corps of Engineers or other elements of the Department of Defense. And I also want to thank the corporate community that has stood up. I know, for example, that Uber has been transporting many of these families as they arrive from overseas free of cost, and we thank them for that. A number of hotel chains have stepped forward to provide housing accommodations for them as well. And I want to thank people all across the world. As the mayor has already mentioned and others have mentioned, we have offers of support and help, concrete help from countries throughout Latin America, Israel as well, and we are grateful for those offers. Those offers are forwarded to the local authorities who will obviously make a determination about where best they fit in now or in the future. We're grateful to them. We're grateful to the whole country and to this community that has responded the way it has and continues to respond. And we continue to hold hope. We pray for God's grace. We pray for miracles. And we pray for God's peace and strength on the family and those that have been impacted by this. Muy brevemente en español para decirle que esta es una tragedia bien complicada. Este edificio tenía un número de personas del extranjero trabajando con el Departamento de Estado. Sabemos que han venido varias familias, han podido obtener visas humanitarias para viajar. La mayoría ya están acá, algunos todavía están en viaje. El Departamento de Estado ha hecho un gran labor en esta función y hay personal del Departamento de Estado aquí que va a ayudar a avanzar la necesidad para que cualquier tipo de viaje ahora o en el futuro que sea necesario. FEMA obviamente está aquí. En cambio a otros desastres, en este caso las víctimas se van a inscribir a través del sistema que ha creado el condado, del centro de víctimas que está acá y de familia, y a través de eso se va a procesar cualquier tipo de beneficios que sean elegibles de parte del gobierno federal y FEMA. También de otras agencias federales que están dispuestas a ayudar si es necesario, incluyendo el Departamento de Defensa, el cuerpo de ingenieros del Ejército y los demás. Y también darle las gracias a la comunidad corporativa que ha respondido, compañías que han ofrecido a ayudar a estas familias cuando llegan al extranjero a llegar acá, hoteles que han dado habitación a estas familias que vienen del extranjero. Ha sido una gran ayuda a toda la comunidad, le damos las gracias a todas las personas que están trabajando aquí de todo el estado, de Tampa, de Orlando, de todas partes del estado que están aquí respondiendo a esta horrible tragedia. Y seguimos rezando por milagros, porque para Dios todo es posible, y también rezamos que Dios les dé paz y fortaleza a las familias que siguen esperando noticias y que han sido afectadas por esto. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you, Senator, for the kind words and your appreciation. And now the Surfside Mayor, Charles Burkett.
I don't have a lot to add to those comments other than to say little Surfside hasn't been so little these days. I've received personal calls from the White House. I've received a call from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi. I've received support from our two U.S. Senators, Rick Scott and Marco Rubio. I've received support from Debbie Wasserman Schultz and all the U.S. representatives. Governor DeSantis has been instrumental and has been here over and over again. Our county mayor, Daniela Cava, has also been incredibly supportive. We don't have a resource problem here, we have a luck problem. The issue is that we've been fighting the elements, we've been fighting the fire, but we have one objective, and that is to bring those people out of the rubble safely and return them to their families. And that's all we're gonna do today, that's all we're gonna do tomorrow, and that's all we're gonna do the next day and the next day until it's done. So our objective here is to bring these people out of that rubble and to support the families. That's all there is to it. It's not complicated, and the work goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And now Miami-Dade Fire Chief Alan Kaminsky.
Good evening. We continue with our aggressive search and rescue strategy. We were able to contain the fire and minimize the smoke earlier this morning, approximately around 10:30, 11. And we've continued our search and rescue efforts. Currently, we're searching the entire debris field. We separated into multiple sections, and we're actively, with our 5 task force that we rotate through, we actively are applying our search and rescue techniques. We're still aggressively using all our tools that we have in regards to the sonar. We've done several sweeps, again with the debris field with our K9. As well as using any type of video equipment that we have as we're establishing these search techniques. We'll continue going through this, as hard as we can. I'm very proud of our task force members, very proud of Miami-Dade Fire Rescue and all our activities that we've done. And we're going to continue searching and hopefully with a positive outcome.
Thank you, Chief. And now Erica Benitez, Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, PIO en español.
Muy buenas noches. Nosotros continuamos en este momento nuestras tareas de búsqueda y rescate. Afortunadamente hemos podido controlar el incendio que hemos visto estos últimos días. Teníamos mucho humo en el área, lo cual prevenía ciertas labores de rescate, pero esto ha mejorado bastante y nos hemos podido ahora buscar en los escombros, sobre los escombros, por víctimas o sobrevivientes. En este momento también tenemos varios equipos de búsqueda y rescate de todas partes de la Florida, los cuales nos están asistiendo con esta labor, y esta labor va a continuar toda la noche, al igual que hemos estado trabajando todos estos últimos días. Gracias.
Thank you, Erica. Now we're going to be opening up for questions. Please raise your hand and you'll be selected. Go ahead, sir, and please address who you're going to ask the question to.
It's probably for the Mayor. You've mentioned that human remains have been found on the site. I was wondering if you could tell us about the nature of them, about the volume, how much has been found, and the process of being able to identify those victims through people who've given DNA swabs.
I'm going to let the police director address that. Thank you.
Good evening. Yes, we have homicide detectives embedded with the recovery teams, as well as our medical examiner's office personnel. When we have an intact body that's processed on the scene, DNA samples are taken, then they're photographed by our crime scene personnel, transported to the medical examiner. Now, when we come across human remains, that's photographed, collected on the scene, and directly transported to the medical examiner's office for processing. Cuando tenemos un cuerpo humano, tenemos detectives y también crime scene personnel que están ahí para tomar el DNA sampling. Procesamos el víctima y lo transportamos para el ME's office. Si tenemos restos humanos, le toman las fotos, colectan y lo llevan para el medical examiner's office, ahí es donde lo procesan.
We've seen your task force crews up on the rubble. Are the TRT crews still underneath, accessing through the garage, and what are some of the challenges?
No, well, it's extremely difficult. The debris field, again, the type of collapse that we had, it's one of the most difficult. So it's constant challenges that we're coming across. It's not our TRT. Originally it was Miami-Dade Fire Rescue TRT personnel, as well as our Florida Task Force 1 with that initial search, and then how we've been incorporated. But underneath, okay. Yes. But the majority, of our search for today has been, on the top. We've established certain fields that we're searching, and we're searching the entire debris fields now at this time. We delayer and we continue moving throughout.
One follow-up,
yeah.
Sorry. Just a follow-up for the chief. The body that you were able to recover, was that on the top, or can you give us an idea of where your searchers encountered that?
No, I mean it was within within the debris field. I mean it was at a certain as we remove layers, we will tunnel, we will look for different aspects. Again, we continue using our equipment to see if we get specific positions, specific ideal locations where we can look, and we continue to remove debris, and then based on what we see, we try to coordinate the search that way.
Can you please reiterate the number for the unaccounted for, please?
So the accounted for went up by 130 because of the 3 bodies that were identified, and unaccounted to 156.
Mayor, can you tell us 2 things? Are the families going to be allowed to go visit the site while the rescue workers are working? Will there be any accommodation special for the families? And also, are any other buildings being evacuated, or are there any plans to evacuate any other buildings in Miami-Dade?
So as to family members visiting the site, they have asked for an opportunity to be able to reflect and pray near the site, and we are working to accommodate them to make that possible. As to evacuation, I'm going to ask Mayor Burkett to address that, because this is in his city.
Thank you.
I had received calls from many residents who were frightened given the fact that the building they live in, Champlain Towers North, is basically the same building as Champlain Towers South. It was built at about the same time. It was built by the same developer. It was probably built with the same plans. It was probably built with the same materials. And given that we cannot determine what made Champlain South fall down, it's understandable that they're nervous. What I did was I reached out, after speaking to those residents on the first night, or it was the next morning, I reached out to Senator Scott and Mayor Cava and voiced my concerns, and we had a discussion, and the consensus was that taking action was probably necessary. Now, what kind of action to take was the discussion item, and I think the resolution of that was to tell the residents what we knew, give them the option to relocate if they wanted to, and basically get in there and do a top to bottom forensic study of the building. What happened today was our Surfside building official went into the Champlain Towers North and the Champlain Towers East, which is adjacent, and they did a cursory review of the structure. And to paraphrase my conversation with my building official, he came back and said basically that they didn't find anything that was out of order. Now, so that's reassuring, but that is not a deep dive into the building itself. And there are people that have concerns about staying in the building given what's happened. I can't say that I'd be excited about staying in that building either. So what we did was today we were able to talk to FEMA, and FEMA said that they would make arrangements given that it's a relationship between what's happened, the catastrophe that's happened at the South building, and what's potentially going on at the North building in the other circumstances, that they would help with the relocation, the temporary relocation, because it's likely that would probably only take a couple weeks for the deep dive, and then we would know, and we could probably say with certainty, or most likely, that the building is safe. Because right now I can't answer that question, but maybe in 2 weeks we can. Thank you.
Just to follow up on the North Tower, so there's no mandatory evacuation of the North Tower?
There was never a mandatory evacuation. It's always been voluntary.
And you mentioned the FEMA resources for the people who do want to relocate. How should they be accessing those FEMA?
That's a good question, and we're working on those details.
If I could just
yes.
say, so we've identified a boundary for the FEMA relief, and it will include that area so that these families would be eligible for any FEMA relief.
What about the hotel next door? No one's in the hotel next door, right?
Red Cross is addressing that. That was evacuated, as was the building to the south, in an abundance of caution, given that the structure that still remains was deemed to be unsafe.
But everything in east and north is voluntary at this moment, based upon how people feel about where they're living.
Given what I've just said, yes.
Two questions. One, probably for fire. When was the last person alive pulled out of the rubble?
I don't have the exact time frame, but it would have been within the first few hours when we arrived.
Secondly, we also heard that there's really expensive hotels in the area. Four Seasons is like $1,800 tonight. Have officials heard any reports about that, or have any concerns about price gouging?
That's crises. Do we know anything from the Red Cross gentlemen?
I'm not aware.
In terms of anybody who's been relocated as a result of this entire situation, there's no price gouging.
I have a question for the mayor of Surfside, sir. We interviewed this morning and asked you if you were aware that the 2018 engineering report had been sent to the office of the town officials. You said you'd look into that. Has there been any update?
Yes.
Has the city received this report?
I was sent that report today. As you know, I was the mayor in 2006 and 2010, and I became the mayor again in 2020. So I was not privy to that report at the time. However, given that issue was raised, I asked my building official to forward that report to me. I've read that report, and there are issues in that report.
But can you confirm if the association sent the city that report prior to you coming into office?
The report was sent in 2018, yes.
So the town
to the town, yes.
Was there any correspondence following it?
That's like I said, what we're doing now is we're saving lives and we're bringing people out of the rubble. What we're going to do is the next phase, after we address the support for the families, is we are going to do a very deep dive into why this building fell down. And I imagine that's going to end up being a very comprehensive sort of project.
Go ahead, question right here.
Is there an update on the scope of the audit that will be conducted? Like how many structures will be included in that?
So Miami-Dade County is proceeding already to all of the buildings that are at the recertification time, And that process is under review, and I do not have the total number, but it will be completed within 30 days.
And this is the final question here.
It's really just practical and pragmatic. What's going on around here for residents' sake? What streets are open?
Okay.
Where can they go?
That's
People
it.
can't get
Police
around.
barriers. Yeah.
Barriers that have been put up. What's going on to mitigate that?
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Chief Julio Hierro from the town of Surfside. Currently, the perimeter extends from 85th Street to 96th Street. Harding Avenue is closed. Collins Avenue is obviously closed. We are asking for everyone to please avoid the area. Only residents are going to be allowed in to this interior perimeter. Obviously, our residents are suffering a lot as well in entering and exiting here. So the fewer people that enter, the quicker they can get in and out. East-west traffic is still available. As soon as we can, the goal is to open at least Harding Avenue and make it both north and southbound. Collins Avenue is going to be remaining closed for some time. La situación del tráfico en la ciudad de Surfside, estamos cerrando la ciudad prácticamente. Solo residentes pueden entrar de la calle 96 adentro del town de Surfside. Del sur, en la 85 calle, estamos dirigiendo el tráfico a Byron Avenue y pueden entrar por el sur en la calle 88, solo residentes. Estamos pidiendo que por favor, si no viven en Surfside o tienen necesidad de estar en esta área en general, por favor eviten la zona. Gracias.
Thank you, everyone. And now for Creole is going to be Ivan Morriso.
And you've been listening to a press conference in Surfside, Florida, an extremely difficult task for first responders. They're working around the clock to rescue survivors of the deadly condo collapse. A lot of fear about what's next. Right now, we know there are 156 people still unaccounted for and 130 people accounted for. It's unclear of how many people are dead, but at last check, at least 5 people, we were told in that update. Stick around. We'll have much more coming up on this heartbreaking story after a short break. Welcome back. I'm Brittany Jones. Well, topping the news this half hour is the latest on the deadly condo collapse. We are learning of an alarming new report detailing major structural damage to the Champlain South Tower. We found out that engineers actually sounded the alarm 3 years ago on the structural integrity of the building. BNC correspondent Astrid Martinez is live from the site of the collapse with the latest on this tragedy. And Astrid, this report is also raising many questions like, did they see this coming?
Correct. There are so many questions that are angering and frustrating families who have loved ones that are missing or who have lost family in this tragedy. Questions like who knew about this report, when did they know about it, and how come something was not done sooner? Because if you look at some of the issues that were raised, they're alarming.
Desperation and destruction in Surfside, Florida, nearly 3 days after the deadly condo collapse. As more and more time passes, families are frustrated by the tedious search and rescue process. But city officials warn that rescue crews face growing difficult situations, including smoke and air quality issues. They plead for patience as the work is slow and methodical in order to save lives.
We're facing very incredible difficulties with this fire. The fire has been going on for a while. It's a very deep fire. It's extremely difficult to locate the source of the fire, and so they've been working around the clock. These fire rescue teams, these brave men and women under the rubble to fix this problem so they can get on, but it is hampering our search efforts.
For firefighters, the work is nonstop, digging through twisted metal and debris, heavy machinery now involved.
So we created a trench using heavy equipment to try to isolate the fire and continue searching for victims in the part of the pile that we can access.
At the same time, a 2018 inspection report of the Champlain Towers came to light Saturday morning, warning of design flaws and failing waterproofing that would lead to exponential damage. The author cautioned of abundant cracking and crumbling in the walls, beams, and columns of the basement parking garage, and major structural damage on the concrete slab below the pool deck.
No, we knew nothing about this report.
The 2018 report did not give any evidence that the building was about to collapse, but it did say most of the concrete deterioration needs to be repaired in a timely fashion.
The main thing is that we have to give time to people who are put in charge to investigate this.
The director of the Moss School of Construction, Infrastructure, and Sustainability at FIU says it's important not to read too much into the report's language, which is fairly standard for an oceanfront condo restoration project.
You find out that it's more than one factor that contributes to that collapse. It's not just one factor. You can say this is really the reason that why the building collapsed. It's not. It doesn't work that way.
Those who live in the tight-knit community of Surfside are trying their best to help those who are missing loved ones in the condo collapse. Volunteers set up a memorial outside a tennis court just a block away from the Champlain Towers with pictures of those still unaccounted for and their names. It's a race against time to find the 159 people missing, but this community and first responders refuse to give up hope.
Now, it appears there were plans to correct these issues, but they weren't solidified until April of this year, 3 years after the initial report was issued. As you heard during the press conference, there were also concerns raised earlier today when that report came to light, which is a sister tower that is just a few blocks away from the Champlain Towers here, which was constructed the exact same year with the exact same design, constructed by the exact same people. So the mayor of Surfside, he was calling for a possible temporary evacuation of the structure to make sure that structural engineers can go inside and check if this building was safe and sound. Brittany.
And Astrid, you actually found some folks who are helping with the search today. Tell us about that.
I was able to speak to the vice president of a humanitarian organization called Cadenas Internacional. They work with the dogs that help search the rubble and look for life. We talked about the type of training that these dogs go through, how long the shifts are, and the special dog that he works with. Typically you see such bigger dogs, but he works with a special kind of breed, smaller, which can get able to go into smaller crevices. Listen to what he had to say about RUBIO is the name of his dog, his task today here during this collapse.
It's really not very technical. It's just binary by training and rewarding the dogs to do the job on getting the scent of the human being flesh. And that's choosing and rewarding for that, basically, just like you would by throwing the dog the ball and fetching and getting and giving a treat. So that's basically doing it over and over it, so he will get used to that. And obviously he's a small dog, he can go over the rubble, very agile.
Now, we also talked about the fact that this organization travels to disasters around the globe. We talked about the possibility of rescuing and survivors here in the rubble. He says the first 72 hours are definitely crucial, but he or no other human being can really put a timeline on life, that it's up to God, it's a miracle, and this community believes in miracles, and I know that's hope is a word that everyone is hanging on to here. Brittany?
Yes, as Senator Marco Rubio put it, he said prayers are needed, God's grace and mercy. Thank you, BNC's Astrid Martinez reporting live for us in Miami. Well, a 2018 report warned of design flaws to the condo, which was built 40 years ago. Now, Craig Dowdell is with me now to talk about this. He is an assistant director of security and crisis management. Craig, good evening and welcome to BNC.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
We are happy to have you with us, too, to talk about such an important story, such a heartbreaking story. And so, Craig, there are a number of buildings along the beach side, and this structure has been up for 40 years, as we just mentioned. In your expertise, what would cause a building to come down like that?
We have to understand the foundation of the building. As the building is built, you have to look at the base of the building as far as how the weight is transferred from the upper floors down to the lower floors. And as that weight transfers, it's going into the ground. Therefore, stabilization takes place by the foundation, and then it is built up. and it supports the weight from the top down to the bottom and into the ground.
Wow. I mean, it just reminds you, people have said, like witnesses, that it looked like the Twin Towers when they were struck on 9/11.
Correct. With the Twin Towers in 9/11, the same thing happened. The weight, it begins at the top and then is transferred down through each beam into the ground. With the World Trade Center, understand that building was built differently. Each floor was 1 acre. Each floor did not have the same interior structure as this building here that we're looking at that collapsed. It had an exoskeleton like an insect. Everything, because of the 1 acre floors, 110 stories, they had to put all of the structural beams on the outside, with the only thing interior for its core was the stairwells and the elevator shafts.
Well, Craig,
Two different types of structures.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I guess, when people look at the amount of rubble that we see on our screens. Well, you talk about the condo owners. They filed a lawsuit in 2015 regarding cracks in the outside structure. Condo owners typically pay HOA fees, which cover the cost of maintaining property. Should those fees have gone toward fixing the property?
That I would have to defer to some type of legal counsel. I couldn't really answer that question directly.
Okay.
I don't want to say anything that would be wrong.
Well, when you look at just the structural design of it, and just how Astrid just mentioned in her story about the things that were in those reports ahead of time, is that something that typically people should take very seriously when it comes to looking at these warnings that happened in the past?
You should always take any type of report seriously, especially when you're talking about structures and people inhabiting these buildings. If there's something that is structurally unstable, it should be dealt with immediately.
Is there anything that you know from your expertise what homeowners should do if property managers aren't taking action to address structural issues?
That should go back to City Hall. Mainly, this is where the Bureau of Buildings comes into play. They're the ones that gives the certificate of occupancy on these buildings. So residents should always go back to their local representation, their elected official, to press an issue to have something repaired.
And so moving forward after this, what would the next steps be in the building investigation look like, in your opinion?
In my opinion, the next steps would be, after they have finished the rescue and concluded this operation, it'll be turned over to legal and to all the experts dealing with building inspections. They're going to look at all the permitting. They're going to look at complaints. They're going to interview the residents. All these things will take place to come to some final conclusion as to what caused this catastrophic failure.
Well, Craig, we know tonight there are more questions than answers, but we appreciate you for weighing in on this tonight. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And stay with us. We have much more news after a short break. Stay with us.